Welcome to the Crush the Quote webinar series, which is a webinar series that features industry experts, business leaders, individual sellers, enablement practitioners, and entrepreneurs from all over the world who come here to share their ideas, their experience, their thoughts, and practical strategies for us as individuals and for companies as a whole, looking to embrace change, drive growth, and create outcomes that matter for our businesses, our teams, and even for ourselves. Today, we have Tim Wilkes joining us from the sunny and extremely apparently freezing cold Sydney, Australia. Tim has a lifetime of experience simplifying the often bewildering complexity of modern business and supporting technologies. He knows that in today's competitive world, creating connections that are meaningful, differentiation can seem unattainable. So he uses a combination of behavioral insights and carefully crafted stories to attract, to enchant, and persuade audiences. And so we are hopefully going to be enchanted and persuaded this morning. So with that, I'm now going to hand over to Tim. Thank you, Tim.
Yes, so I promised to do my very, very best to, what was it you said, Catherine, to enchant everyone by telling you a few stories. So yes, I've been a professional presenter for just about as long as I can possibly remember. These days, I practice what I like to call weaponized storytelling. And that is essentially blending together behavioral insights with classical persuasion and giving that a mission, which is weaponized storytelling. So I've got some visuals I'm going to share with you. So the cornerstone of all that, obviously, is wrapped around the trending topic of storytelling. So years ago, I guess I started off in the world of storytelling by observing how the best in the business, the guys in marketing, the guys in advertising, indeed, how some of those guys in Hollywood actually tell stories to us to influence the way that we think about different things. So really what I'm going to do today is tell you stories about storytelling. In fact, I'm going to share with you a whole bunch of different examples, not just from me, but how the very, very best in the business actually use messages and stories to influence how we all think about things. In fact, I think it's incredibly, a powerful thing that stories really do change our perception of everything, including the value of something. Let me start off then by sharing this vision of product and story being two sides of the same coin. I spent my life working in the world of technology, where you've got software engineers building amazing things. And oftentimes I find that in that engineer's mindset, it tends to be all about the product. You get information about the bits and bytes. I'm even thinking now about, I'm sure you'll all actually just type in the chat box. Do you all remember the Nokia thing? Were you all around long enough? Just say yes, Tim, if you remember Nokia in the chat for me. And there was a time when, Nokia, in fact, and BlackBerry and all those guys at the same time were out there, talking about battery life and the size of the keyboard, etc. It was all about the product and the measurable stuff. The Nokia 3110, absolutely. I think I've still got one. I think it's in the garden. I use it for hammering nails in. And Peter remembers pre-Nokia. And of course, what happened with that? It wasn't all about the product. Someone by the name of Steve Jobs came along and just told a completely different story about the entire category, and it all changed. It all changed completely. So it's very, very true that just having the best product isn't enough. In fact, just having the best product is barely enough. You actually need both. You need a great product and a great story. You can have the best tech in the world, but if you don't tell the right story, it's going to fail. I would love at this point in time to be able to share with you a story about a great product in the marketplace that failed because it didn't have a suitably great story to go with it. Of course, the problem with that is that none of us have heard of any great product that failed because we don't know about it because it didn't have a great story to support it. But what I might do is talk about a context that a story gets wrong all the time, and I get terribly frustrated because I don't think anyone notices this. Right? I'm assuming we've all purchased something online. I'm not even going to ask for a yes or no. The question I'm going to ask here, though, is how many of you have purchased something online, got to the checkout screen, and in the middle of that checkout screen, there's a box which says, enter discount code here. Give me a yes team or a no team if you've ever come across the big discount box in the screen. And what happens when that occurs? Yeah, all the time. What happens when that occurs? You stop, don't you? You stop, and if you're anything like me, you immediately go out and see if you can't find a discount code somewhere else. Now, why are you doing that? So the context is, as soon as you see that website's telling you a story, and the story it's telling you is someone is getting a better deal than you are. And that is frankly offensive. I'm going to go, I've actually not purchased things because that discount box occurred, and I've got frustrated trying to find a discount code that works. So that is a great example of a sales experience failing because the story created completely the wrong context for you. So in the next 30 minutes, what I plan to share with you all is really three things. So call it an agenda, but it's not really. So I'm going to start off talking about context, and specifically about context influences the way we feel, and that determines just about everything. In fact, the story and the context is far more important than the thing for us as humans. I'm also going to talk about how this process of trying to educate people into buying your product almost never works. Far better to capture people's imagination. And of course, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of examples from the very best in the world. And I'm going to start off doing that, if I may. Now, what I'd like you all to do now is I'd like you all to imagine that you're wine connoisseurs. You love your wines, probably not too hard for everybody here. And I'd like you to imagine that some time ago, you bought a bottle of vintage wine and you paid $20 for that bottle of wine. Time's passed, and today that bottle of wine is worth $75, and you decide to drink it. So here's the question. What does drinking that bottle of wine cost you? Does drinking that bottle of wine cost you A, $20 what you paid for it? Does it cost you B, $20 plus compound interest to date? Does it cost you $75, which is what you could get on the open market if you decided to sell it? Or does it cost you minus $55 because you're getting to drink a $75 bottle of wine that you only paid $20 for? When I pose this question, I'm always incredibly careful not to influence you. It would be easy for me to tell you a story one way or the other. But what's actually going on here is very interesting, because all of these answers are right. All of these answers are right, but they are influenced by the stories that we're telling ourselves. The stories that we're telling ourselves influences the response. So category, those who put A, $20 what you paid for it, these are the guys who are thinking in the sunk cost. That's what I paid for it. That's what it's worth when I drink it. That's what it cost me. Perfectly reasonable. That's the story you tell yourself. We've obviously got an accountant in the room. That's B, working out compound interest rate calculations to date. Get the spreadsheet out. That's what it's going to be. We've got the people in the opportunity cost bucket, which is C. If I sold it, I could get $75. Don't know if we had anyone in that. And then we've got people like me glass half full, optimistic kind of guys. I'm going to tell myself that bottle of wine's even better because it's minus $55. Why am I telling you this? What's this example for? So if the value of something as simple as a bottle of wine is so variable based on the stories that we tell ourselves, imagine how powerful the ability to wield stories to influence people's perception of value of things is. And we do this all the time. So we think that our perception of value is empirical. It's something that an accountant would measure on a spreadsheet. In actual fact, nothing could be further from the truth. Antonio Damasio said it brilliantly when he spoke about this. You know, we're guided by our emotions, not by our rationality. In fact, on planet Earth, Homo sapiens are the only creature which, you know, possesses the capability for rational thought with this big neocortex thing. You know, all other creatures manage perfectly well based on just, you know, pure instinct and heuristics. In fact, even us humans, until fairly recently in our evolution, manage perfectly well exactly that same. So we think we have rational thought to allow us to make choices and decisions. In actual fact, it's probably for something else completely. Now, those of you who have heard of Daniel Kahneman, he put it brilliantly when he said this. And what he's saying here is, yes, we all possess the ability to think and have rational thought, but largely we don't. And we don't, frankly, because it's bloody hard work. It's tiring. We can't have rational thought for everything. What we actually do is we post-rationalize the decisions that are made elsewhere for reasons we don't fully understand. So let's talk about Daniel Kahneman a little bit. I don't know if those of you who are aware of Daniel Kahneman, won the Nobel Prize for economics. And he came up with this wonderful model of the rider on the elephant. And the rider on the elephant was an analogy he drew up, which is very powerful, where he spoke about system 1 and system 2 thinking. And in that, what he's saying is system 1 is the elephant, which is driven by emotion. It's actually very, very fast. It's actually controlling it. And the system 2, which is, you know, basically the spreadsheet, you know, version of rationality. It's slow, it's deliberate. Now, the fascinating thing, of course, it's the rider who thinks they're in charge, when in actual fact, you know, we all know that if the elephant, you know, saw a mouse over here and wanted to run away, or a bucket of peanuts and wanted to go eat them, that's where the elephant is going to go, regardless of what happens. So the whole point with telling stories is to talk to that part of us that we don't really have introspective access to talk to the emotional being inside of all of us, which is how we really make the choices. Different way of thinking about this analogy was from the wonderful Jonathan Haidt, and he said it's rather like the difference between the Oval Office and the press office. You know, the press office thinks it's in charge, but its job is really to come up with post-rationalizations for decisions that are made elsewhere for reasons it totally doesn't understand. So where did this all start? So what I thought I'd do is I'd like to share with you where professional storytelling in the sales context actually came from. And to do that, I need to take you back to the mid-1950s. So I'm going to play some ads for you. It's actually a string of ads circa 1950 for automobiles. So sit back, watch this for a couple of minutes. This is how advertising used to be. Let's roll the VT on this. In 3, 2, 1, let's roll it.
The new Rambler Classic.
It's flipping the town.
This is the Classic, the new Rambler Classic, the brand new 61 Rambler Classic.
Pontiac is a revelation in beauty.
Pontiac is big and roomy.
Pontiac is long, long, long on economy.
And furthermore, Dodge gives more miles from every tank full.
And every 58 Ford has new Magic Circle steering.
Inside, you'll find this lady's beauty vanity.
This luxury is standard equipment on all the Larks.
Even has a city horn and a country horn. Push-button command of all driving ranges.
No other car in Mercurysfield offers you automatic push-button lubrication that we call Multiluber.
All you do is pull the control button, and the magic starts. The world's only hideaway hardtop.
The roof slides open, the step drops down, and you have 3 cars in one. Family station wagon, fun-filled convertible, and utility wagon.
All of this sort of makes you wonder what those masterminds are going to think up next, doesn't it?
So there you go. That was advertising in the mid-50s. An endless list of facts, features and functions. Actually, I will confess that I've no idea what a magic steering wheel is. But there you go. And I actually think that the world needs to bring back the city horn and the country horn. I think that'd be absolutely amazing. I want one of those. But after a little while, it changed. And this is widely believed to be the very first TV commercial that employed storytelling. So I'm going to play this for you now. So let's roll this. This is the birth of storytelling in sales and advertising. Let's go.
Have you ever wondered how the man who drives a snowplow drives to the snowplow? This one drives a Volkswagen. So you can stop wondering.
There you go. What a staggering, remarkable difference from endless list of features. And I would challenge anyone. I would challenge anyone to tell me any of the brand of cars in the previous 1950s video. And I would also strongly suggest that you'll never forget Volkswagen Beetle. 2 sentences, a question and an answer. Have you ever wondered how the man who drives a snowplow gets to the snowplow? This one drives a Volkswagen Beetle. What they could have done, of course, was, choose to list features and functions. You could have said, what could you have said? You could have said, well, it's got its engine in the back, so the weight's over the wheels, giving you traction. It's air cooled, so the engine won't freeze. All of that spun around into a simple and incredibly powerful story. And Volkswagen Beetle became the #1 selling car in the United States for many years. I'd suggest largely because someone told a story that captured the imagination, that resonated, and got people to go out and buy them. Amazing, the power of storytelling. So it's far better to talk to the elephant and capture the imagination than it is to list facts and features. But we still see that today, don't we? In fact, Catherine and I were talking about this just the other day. If we know this, why is it that most organizations, it doesn't matter what you're selling, still tends to try and educate audiences, still tries to list the facts and features? Actually, here's a question. Sweet, brown, and fizzy. What beverage am I talking about when I say sweet, brown, and fizzy? Coke. Coke's the obvious one. Could be Pepsi. Could be Dr. Pepper. I'm a big fan of Dandelion and Burdock. They all fit those descriptions, don't they? But that's just listing the attributes, the characteristics. It's not capturing the imagination at all. So we still get this. We think the value is in the thing, the product, the service. We think largely, or lots of people think, that the story, the context that we create around it is somehow magic fairy dust that you sprinkle on the top that adds something. I'm going to argue that it's absolutely intrinsic to the value perception of the product, and its success or failure will depend as much on the story that you tell about it as it does about the characteristics of the product as well. Luckily, Coke don't describe their drink as sweet, brown and fizzy, do they? They describe it like this. Masterful work of storytelling by WPP, one of the greatest and largest advertising agencies in the world. Take a look at that for a moment. Taste the feeling. I don't even know what that means. That doesn't even make sense. Yet we all do know what it means, don't we? And I bet we can all remember the taste of cola in our mouths right now. You look at the image. How does that make you feel? It's telling you a story. It's designed specifically to reach down into us and trigger an emotional response in the connection to Coke. It's not sweet, brown and frizzy. It's taste the feeling, or a whole raft of other amazing stories that they've told about it. Let me give you another example. Seem to be sticking with the car theme today. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? That is a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. I think that's absolutely gorgeous. Let me tell you a story about Rolls-Royce. Let me start off talking about the founder of Rolls-Royce. Here he is, Mr. Henry Royce. Exactly the type of chap you can see building cars in a shed at the bottom of his garden, I would suggest. That's pretty much what he did, by the way. So good old Henry Royce. He was a mechanical engineer from Birmingham, and he had an ambition from being a child. He had this burning ambition to create the world's finest automobile. And he did. He created just an automobile the likes of which the world had never seen. And you know what happened? Nobody cared. Nobody gave one hoot about Henry Royce's fine automobile. But then one day, Henry Royce met Mr. Charles Rolls. Now, Charlie Rolls was a completely different character, born with a silver spoon in his mouth, as they say, went to Eton, went to Cambridge, very well connected, the son of an earl, I believe. And he once set the land speed record at 84 miles an hour. Wonderful chap, but he was connected and he was a natural storyteller. And all of a sudden, the rest is history. All of a sudden, you have a great product built by Henry Royce and a great story told by Charles Rolls. And still today, amazing power, the Rolls-Royce is widely regarded still today as the finest automobile in the world. But without the story, no one would ever have heard of it. No one would ever have heard of it at all. So what I might do then is I might challenge you all then as we go through this to maybe to think a little bit differently about things. So rather than thinking facts and figures and education, let's think about how we might tell stories in a little bit of a different way. And I'm going to do that by, I'll get you to pose. I'm going to get you to think just a little bit, and I'll show you some examples. So let's say you're an executive in a soft drinks company, and you're eyeing up Coca-Cola, and you want a piece of that market share. They've been, the dominant non-alcoholic beverage other than water forever. You want a slice of the action. So somebody comes up with this idea and they say, you know what, let's create a drink which tastes better than Coke. Let's create a drink that comes in a larger can, and we're going to sell it for cheaper. Cheaper, bigger can, tastes better, perfectly logical, perfectly rational. No one's going to disagree with you. There's a flaw in the plan, though, isn't there? It's complete rubbish. Just didn't work at all because everyone's tried that. There was, however, one drink that came onto the market which was so unique and so powerful, not only did it take market share away from Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola actually responded by introducing an entirely new drinks category of their own. It was Red Bull. How bizarre. It makes no sense, does it? Because as a drink, Red Bull is what? Red Bull, it's really expensive, comes in a tiny can. They didn't sell it as a soft drink, did it? Did they? They sold it as a stimulant. They sold it as a narcotic. They sold it as a medicine. And as soon as you do that, being expensive, coming in a small dose, and tasting kind of weird, are actually attributes. So I'd argue that this is a story of a product with a great story being incredibly successful. Let me pose another challenge to you about creative and great sales storytelling then. But there was a time when Stella Artois had a very, very high import tax placed upon it into the UK. So the product was more expensive than all the other drinks. So what might you do if all of a sudden what you're selling is more expensive? Can't discount it. There's nothing you can do about it. Well, here's what Stella Artois did. In a stroke of genius, they reframed costing more to being reassuringly expensive. And I love this. I love this. This is a fake ad which they put together, which is a coupon whereby anyone could actually, cut out this coupon, go into a pub and use the coupon to pay extra. You can pay even more using the coupon. Genius. Brilliant piece of sales storytelling. Embrace the negative, tell a different story, turn the negative into a positive. Absolutely fantastic. Let me give you another example. This is a classic example. The best in the business. Classic example. Avis is only #2 in rental cars. Sounds like an ad for Hertz until they drop in that second line. So we try harder. This was the time when Hertz were absolutely dominant in the marketplace. And you say, well, bigger choice of cars, etc. So they chose to focus the message on something completely different. And simply by telling a different story, Avis closed the market share gap between them and Hertz from 32% to 13%, and that happened within just 3 years. They changed nothing other than the story they told about themselves. Absolutely brilliant. We're doing a lot about automotive and beverages. So let me give you one more before I share with you what I think is the greatest sales story of all time, as I promised. So these days, it's all about instant gratification. Amazon Prime, overnight delivery, same day delivery, faster, 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 faster. What might you do if your product took a long time to arrive? What might you do? Well, how about you simply tell a story where it taking a long time to arrive is a virtue rather than a liability? Nothing annoys a bartender more than somebody walking up and ordering a bunch of drinks and ordering the Guinness last because it takes a long time to settle. Guinness know this, so they simply turned it into an attribute. Another genius stroke of storytelling. Let me tell you about the greatest sales story of all time. And we have to go back to the 1930s to tell this story. Who here's got an engagement ring? Who here's bought an engagement ring, etc.? And what is the stone in that engagement ring? It's a diamond, right? Because obviously, what could be more natural than the connection between the everlasting, eternal nature of a diamond and the connection with enduring true love? Perfectly natural connection between the two, except that it's not natural at all. In fact, if you wind the clock back to the 1930s and 40s, it was quite common for engagement rings not to have a stone in them at all. Or that stone could equally have been a ruby or a sapphire or something else. In fact, the stats show that back in the 1930s and 40s, only about 10% of rings had stones in, and only about 2 or 3% of those had diamonds in them. So what changed? What changed was this. It was an ad campaign. It was 4 words, probably the greatest sales story of all time. Please go ahead, look up a young lady called Frances Gerary, who's a copywriter working in the advertising space. The tale is she woke up in the middle of the night, this popped into her head, and she wrote this line down: "A diamond is forever." De Beers picked up on this. Obviously, it was the campaign for them. Do you think it worked? Oh, yeah, it worked big time. Let me give you the stats. 1939, diamond sales globally, $23 million. Hardly worth getting up for. 1979, 2.1 billion. Today, global diamond market, nearly $30 billion from a 4-word story. But it doesn't stop there. It gets better. Actually, Catherine, I'll ask you this question. How much money should a man spend on an engagement ring for a lady?
Oh, that's not a fair question to ask. That's a lot of pressure, man. That's a lot of pressure. You 2 months salary.
Oh, we got 2 months salary. Yeah. Yeah, we got
that's
2
so
months
funny.
salary. Right. Where did that come from? Same advertising campaign. It actually started off here. People didn't know, according to a jeweler you spoke to. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
It's all an ad campaign. They simply ran this: an engaging way to make a month's salary last a lifetime. Awesome storytelling. This is interesting. So they actually didn't expect people to spend a month's salary, and people didn't, but it was a guideline. But people, because of anchoring, people would actually spend maybe 3 weeks' salary on the engagement ring. And all of a sudden, diamond values and diamond sales went through the roof. The marketplace went up. So a really smart person thought, oh, if it's that easy to get people to spend more money on diamond rings, they ran this ad campaign. How do you make 2 months salary last forever? Bingo! All of a sudden, it was 2 months salary. I haven't been able to find a copy of this, but apparently in Japan, if you ask that question, the average Japanese gentleman will tell you that it's actually 3 months salary that you should spend, because they simply ran this with 3 months in it to change the context of the value and the story going forwards. Not bad. $24 billion created from a 4-word story that had 1 month and 2 months simply added onto it. So let me bring all this home then. So as you've probably realized, my idea of weaponized storytelling is to take the persuasion arts of classical rhetoric, behavioral insights, and regular story, mash them together, give them a mission. And deploying weaponized storytelling means that if you have a great product, in fact, even if you have an average product, put it together with a great story, and you really can create absolute alchemy. You can create absolute magic in the marketplace. So there you go. I think I've shared with you how the context and the way we tell stories changes our experience of everything, including the value. I think I've shared with you how it is clearly far better to capture the imagination and talk to the elephant than it is to try and educate the rider on the elephant. Much more powerful. And I think I've showed you some very powerful examples from the best in the business, which shows stories can actually be incredibly simple and can generate phenomenal value if they're deployed correctly. And I think we do have a bit of time left. Back to you, Catherine.
Brilliant. Amazing. Thank you so much, Tim. Are there any questions? We have a few moments left. If anyone has any questions or wants to add a comment in.
You've done a great job on why, but a lot of the points you make out, there's a spark of imagination or maybe even genius that we may not all possess. So a lot of us have a dog's breakfast of product messages. How do we start forming the story of the snowplow driver?
Sure. I can't tell you how many times I've had this type of conversation, Patrick. Thank you very much for asking it. So the conversation often goes, I don't know how to tell stories. We all do. We've just forgotten largely how to do that. So I would say embrace your inner child, as John Cleese would say. Start to think a little bit differently about how you might frame it and how you might speak it. I can tell you what I do. I just let it percolate, come up with different messages, and I try them out on people as I walk through it. A trick I often like to do is, one of the things that's unique about the human brain is the ability to make connections to other things. So I'll give you a couple of tips. One is, think of a metaphor, a connection, something that you could use to describe what it is that you're talking about. That's one tip. And the other thing is, what is it that you might do? This is actually a design thinking tip. What might you do to make the way your messaging is currently, what might you do to make it worse?
Okay.
And do the opposite of that. But you're absolutely right. It's not easy, but it is easier than you think if you don't put too much pressure on yourself. Give your subconscious mind time to pop up with different ideas, and you'll probably find it'll crop up with you in the shower in the morning. That seems to be the popular spot for it. Does that make sense? Does that help you, Patrick?
Helps a bit. And then just a comment. I love the elephant metaphor. I think it's perfect for enterprise sales, where we're selling to an individual that is then trying to drive an organization.
If we have a question in the chat, Tim, how do you turn a feature function discussion into a storytelling one?
Kind of the same things. Thank you, Paul Moss, for sharing that. Probably the first thing to do is to embrace storytelling as a way of communicating, to understand the fact that people may think they want facts, features, and functions in order to make the decision, but the insight that actually they don't. They are going to make that decision for something else, a completely different reason, and your job is to give them that different reason so they can make it. I'll give you a quote for this, that the wonderful David Ogilvy, the founder of Ogilvy and Mather, famously said, people don't think what they feel, don't say what they think, and don't do what they say, which is a paraphrased way of saying that people actually don't have full introspection of the reasons why they make the decisions. So your role as the storyteller or as the seller is to give them the emotion that will cause them to buy something. Conversation I often have jokingly over a dinner table, if you want to examine how this works, is how many handbags, how many shoes, how many gadgets do you have, and how do you actually justify that to yourself? That's exactly this at work. This is the stories that we tell overriding that part of it. Oh, what's Patrick said, buyers are liars and all liars are buyers, or is that what you're trying to say there, Patrick? I think maybe you are. Yes. Other than that, look, my contact details are up on screen here. If you think I might be able to help any of you or any of your organizations with some judicious deployment of weaponized storytelling, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm actually quite a nice person, very approachable, and I'd be delighted to help. So thank you all very much for attending and engaging with me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Tim. I have one last question before the folks drop off. Is there any recommended reading or resources that you can share with the crew?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Let me absolutely recommend Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, where he talks about the rider and the elephant. That will give you a real good insight into this. Let me give you one more recommended reading as well, from the godfather of persuasion, Robert Cialdini, amazing book called Influence. which is an absolutely fantastic book to start understanding the behavioral sciences behind decision making. It's also a fabulous book because Bob Cialdini wrote that book as a means for consumers to protect themselves from the tricks used by the advertising agency. And to this day, he's still slightly horrified that people in the advertising and persuasion business actually use it as a bit of a Bible. So there you go, 2 books, Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, Robert Cialdini's book, Influence.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tim. Amazing session. I think the folks have taken away a lot. And thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to potentially having you on our next webinar.